Something just quietly broke in the global financial system, and almost nobody noticed. Global reserves have fallen to their lowest level since 1992. No headlines, no panic, no emergency meetings on TV, just silence. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Because while everyone is distracted by AI, elections, and whatever Elon Musk tweeted this week, the foundation of the global economy is slowly shifting underneath us. But to understand why this matters, you need to understand one thing first. The US dollar isn't just money, it's power. After World War II, the United States didn't just rebuild the world, it redesigned how money moves across it. The dollar became the global reserve currency, meaning almost every country on Earth needed it to trade, settle debts, and buy commodities like oil. And that created an invisible advantage. Today, over 58% of global reserves are still held in dollars. That might sound strong, but in 2000, it was over 70%. That's not stability, that's erosion. And here's why it matters. When countries hold dollars, they don't just hold cash, they buy U.S. Treasury bonds. That creates constant demand for American debt, allowing the U.S. to borrow money cheaper than anyone else. It's estimated this exorbitant privilege saves the U.S. over $200 billion every year. Yes, billion. That's not a system, that's a cheat code. But like every cheat code in history, it only works until people figure it out. And they have.
The first crack appeared after the 2008 financial crisis. The U.S. printed trillions through quantitative easing, and suddenly central banks started asking a question they never asked before. Are we too dependent on the dollar? Then came 2014. Sanctions on Russia changed the conversation from economic to political. Countries realized something uncomfortable. If your entire financial system runs through the U.S., it can also be shut off by the U.S. And then 2022 happened. The freezing of $300 billion in Russian reserves and removal from SWIFT wasn't just a punishment, it was a signal that access to the global financial system isn't guaranteed, it's conditional. And that's when things started accelerating. Countries didn't panic, they adapted, quietly. China and Russia began settling trade in their own currencies. India bought oil without using dollars. Central banks started buying gold at the fastest pace in modern history, not because they hate the dollar, but because they no longer trust relying on just one system. And here's where it gets interesting. For decades, every international transaction had to pass through U.S.-controlled infrastructure. Banks like J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup acted as middlemen, giving the U.S. visibility into global trade flows. Money didn't just move, data moved, power moved. But now alternatives are being built. Systems like BRICS are expanding, now representing over 25% of global GDP and nearly half the world's population. New payment rails like mBridge are allowing countries to transact directly without touching U.S. banks, and experimental settlement systems, backed partly by gold, are being tested to bypass the dollar entirely. None of these replace the dollar overnight. That's not the point. The point is optionality, because monopolies don't collapse when something better appears. They collapse when alternatives exist. Think about it. Nobody used the dollar because they loved it. They used it because there was no other choice. Now there is, and that changes everything. Because if even a small percentage of global trade shifts away from the dollar, demand for U.S. debt weakens. If demand weakens, interest rates rise. If rates rise, everything from housing to stocks to corporate credit gets squeezed, and suddenly what looked like a stable system starts to feel fragile. This isn't a collapse story, it's a transition story, a slow, quiet rewiring of the global financial system happening in real time. No panic, no headlines, just small shifts compounding over time. And those are the ones that matter most, because the biggest changes in history don't feel dramatic while they're happening. They feel invisible until one day they're not.